You and all your pretty little friends up in the hills where the party never ends. Your schemes and your dreams when you're whole and you're broken. I'm telling all about it in my words unspoken.
Welcome to Words Unspoken, the Hills podcast.
We are two Southern sisters rewatching The Hills and chatting about it for your entertainment.
Today we will be discussing Season 3, Episode 2, Big Girls Don't Cry.
Or do they?
Jem, I am so excited for this episode. This was such a good episode. And of course, we all know what happens in this episode.
It is the biggest character reveal of the entire history of reality TV.
Yay, I'm so excited. Well, we find out things in the opening montage right at the very beginning, Jem.
Things that we didn't know in the last episode.
Lauren thinks it's so nice to have a roommate who doesn't have a boyfriend. Foreshadowing, Jem.
Mm-hmm. And then she says a guy from Audrina's past was about to creep back into her life. And there's a definite emphasis, Susan, on the word creep on Elsie's part. Petty much, Elsie?
So much shade.
So much shade.
So this is actually our first glimpse of Justin Bobby is in the montage, like the opening montage before we even start the episode. I think that's really funny that that's how they introduce him.
Susan, you might remember Justin Bobby as our friend who we spoke to a couple of episodes ago as he was on the road touring with his band, Bobby Rock. If you haven't heard that episode yet, definitely go back and take a listen. There's lots of great insight into Justin Bobby's life. But let's go back in time and talk about where it all began.
So first we start out with one of those famous Spidey lunches outside in the middle of the day. Must be nice, Jem.
Must be nice.
So they're at the bakery talking about the brouhaha from the night before, which of course was the big you know what you did.
And Heidi's talking about how her relationship and Spencer's relationship are nothing like Lauren's previous situation, but that Lauren is comparing the two and saying that they're similar.
Jem, something that struck me about this conversation was Heidi sounded so fake and disingenuous. It was so, I was like wincing the whole time. Like, this conversation is just fake. Spencer was totally checked out of it. He acted like he wasn't even listening to her.
I had the exact same reaction. I actually rewatched the episode this morning to freshen up on it a little bit, and that was my first instinct, is that it was just the most contrived scene, and I think it could be the first scene in The Hills where we can really pick up on the scripting and the pre-planning by the producers, because it was real awkward. But I know we said at the beginning of the show we weren't going to really get into all of that, like what's fake and what's not, so let's get into the meat of the scene, because it's a very meaty scene.
And by that you mean there's no meat whatsoever in it.
Absolutely nothing happens. Heidi stares into space talking about their relationship. Spencer is like, whatever, and like looking at his plate and eating.
And then Heidi casually brings up that they need to paint the apartment. It was so casual, just like such a throwaway comment that I immediately knew that this was going to be a big storyline of the episode, Jem.
And then she says, we could paint it a light yellow. And Spencer throws up, the two arms making a big X and like Family Feud.
Classic Spencer.
Survey says, Survey says, everyone in LA is...
So then we head to the Hillside Villas, and Audrina is talking to Lauren about the saga of Justin, as she calls him.
As the story of Justin Bobby is revealed, it also coincides with Lauren holding a cat in a cashmere sweater.
That cat was so cute.
Cats and Justin Bobby, my two favorite things.
Speaking of artifice. Anyway, so then we finally find out the backstory when all of a sudden Lauren puts things together and realizes Justin is the guy who she knows from the time when he apparently stranded Audrina in Las Vegas. Now, Jem, from my insider knowledge and research I've done, I read somewhere that Justin said that was not a true story and that didn't happen and they just made it up, but I just have his word for it. I did think it was funny when Audrina said, it's not like I'm going to marry the guy.
No, she was not.
No, you're not.
Nor is anyone else, apparently. Justin Bobby will always be a Rolling Stone, Susan. He abandoned you in Vegas. I mean, that sounds pretty dire, Susan.
And then Lauren says something that I love. It's just so funny because there's so much humor in it. And she says, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to get myself in trouble anymore. which is a really great thing to say because she's just coming off like all this drama with Heidi and Spencer in which she stuck her oar in, and she doesn't want to do it again with Audrina, which it's sad to think about what's coming up.
It is sad because I really loved their friendship a lot more than I loved her and Heidi's friendship. If only Elsie and the cat in the sweater had worked together to make sure that Lauren kept her opinions to herself, because they only get her in trouble.
So then we head to Spidey's apartment, and Heidi casually walks in the door, not knowing what's on the other side of the door, Jim.
She had absolutely no clue, Susan, I am sure. Heidi's initial reaction to the redecorating that Spencer has done is, it's a whole different vibe. It's not girly, and she kind of trails off. And I was wondering, Susan, do you have any stories about you and a boy and decorating a house?
Well, Jim, as you know, my husband has decorated our whole house. However, he is much more classy than Spencer, and he actually does a good job, unlike Spencer's horrific artwork. He actually tells Heidi, this is artwork and it's a gift, and it's so insulting, and she's like, oh, instead of yelling at him. Why are you not yelling at him? It's so ugly, Jim. It's beyond ugly.
What if we found out today that Banksy and Spencer were friends, and that he tagged their kitchen counter, and if only they had a piece of it today, it would be very valuable?
Well, I have less respect for Banksy if he did that, because it was so ugly.
Good point, Susan.
So then Spencer announces that he has a special romantic getaway in Santa Barbara planned for the two of them.
I'm sure Heidi has no idea what's coming.
But she still kind of looks annoyed with him. I don't think she's like so excited about the trip to Santa Barbara. She's just like annoyed because he painted their apartment an ugly mural.
But they already did have their only jellyfish aquarium on the West Coast, as told to Kim Kardashian in our last episode.
So then we move to the scene we've all been waiting for, Jim.
Yay!
We go to Cobras and Matadors, and Audrina and Justin are having, I wouldn't call it their first date, but their first date in this new phase that they're in their relationship.
Their first The Hills date.
Let's talk about what Justin's wearing, Jim.
Let's talk about what Audrina's wearing first. She has on an amazing short dress, of which I definitely owned some version of that dress in a couple of colors, and may or may not have worn it on many nights out back in the day. How hot is JB in his knit hat and his long hair?
I thought JB was so hot when he popped that cork. He looked like so practiced and casual and sophisticated. And I was thinking how if that was the first, if I didn't have history behind it and knew everything else, I would think he was like this sophisticated guy who was a world traveler, which I guess he kind of was. But, I wouldn't think he was like he would end up being.
He was definitely kind of a next level of boy compared to what we've seen before with Jason and Jordan and that other one I forgot, like the guys that drink the orange soda or whatever they were. And Brody Jenner is, from a wealthy bloodline and a famous family, but he didn't have that air of sophistication that Justin Bobby shows. And you're right, if we hadn't just had a conversation between Elsie and Audrina about how he abandoned her in Vegas to go to a strip club, we would think he was just this fabulous, mysterious, artistic person, which he kind of is.
Yeah, he is.
But we just could never know what horror is going to befall Audrina at his hands.
Jem, I liked how they both seemed pretty nervous.
Mm-hmm. They were definitely nervous.
Obviously there's cameras surrounding them, so that adds an extra nervousness layer, but I liked it because I'm like, you're nervous when you're going out to dinner with someone that you really like, so I thought that was really cute. So next we head back to the Hillside Villas, and Lo and Lauren are eating some dessert and having a good little gossip sesh, talking about the rekindled flame of Justin and Audrina.
And this is what I love about Lo, is she brings the color commentary to these episodes, because she always has fun and different words to use compared to the other girls, and she really spices up the show from that standpoint. This is kind of setting up, one of the most iconic moments in Hill's history.
I do love Lo, I really do, but she is definitely can be a little catty. Lauren is funny. She said, I'm all about second chances. I really believe in people getting second chances. And Lo, in her wisdom, says, can people really change though?
They really can't, Lo, and if only everyone could have learned that a little bit earlier in life, not just the Hills girls.
But Lauren does think people can change if the right person comes along, and she says that every girl wants to be that person that the guy will change for. And I don't know so much that it's changing. I do believe people can change, but I think it's more they grow up or they mature.
Yeah, definitely, and learn new things. And I don't know, I think that desire to change the person you're dating is just kind of like an innate human thing of like being better than all the previous relationships and just being more amazing and memorable and just being that special person that even if it doesn't last, they always look back and think, oh, she changed me or whatever. It's just like an ego thing, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do love that Lo immediately comes back and says, well, why do you have to have a guy you have to change? Don't you want someone who is good already? And Elsie has this look on her face. She just kind of smirks and says, that's too easy. And I loved that. I loved that look on her face because it's so true, especially for someone like Lauren. She obviously has had some very difficult relationships, whether with Stephen, who obviously it was unrequited, or with Jason when it was just a hot mess. It was neither of those were easy. And
that's true. She just hasn't been able to find like a normal, nice guy yet.
And honestly, she never does until, past the show, it seems like, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. She's never going to have a good on-screen relationship because, she dated Kyle Howard, the actor from My Boys, but it was like because he was on another TV show, the relationship could not be portrayed on a reality show, so he was never on the show. By the time she met William, the show was over, so that's kind of sad. I really wish she could have had a good relationship, but let's be honest, really none of them have good relationships on screen because it's a reality show, and if you have a good relationship, it's going to be boring and they're not going to put it on there.
It was all for entertainment, Susan, at their expense.
So then we head back to Justin and Audrina's hot date, and
I think we're laughing about the same thing.
Yeah, I think we are. Justin tells Audrina she looks hot.
Cutting his meat, and he's eating it. And he's like, I like how you're cutting up the meat, and I'm eating it.
That is disgusting.
Are you his mom?
I know, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, that's a very mom thing to do. But it was funny, too. And then Justin says, I'm different. Can you tell I'm different? And Audrina jumps in and says, yes, I can absolutely tell that you're different.
And for a moment, Susan, we're led to believe that he is.
They're going to be together forever. They're going to be so happy together. It's going to be a relationship for the ages.
They're going to have gorgeous children that look exactly like them.
Pipe dreams, Jem. Pipe dreams. Oh, Justin Bobby.
JB, I love you still.
So let's go now to the origin story of Justin Bobby, Jem. Head back to the Hillside Villas, and Lauren and Lo are talking about the situation, and all of a sudden you hear the key in the lock of Audrina coming in, and they're like, shh, shh, which is so obvious, Jem.
It's pretty obvious, and I love how they've just finished up the conversation about his name, and his name's clearly Justin, and people clearly are calling him Bobby as a nickname. So then, of course, so begins the most epic double name, Susan, for us at least, here as Southern Sisters, since Katie Scarlett O'Hara.
So, Jem, do you want me to tell you the origin story of this? And this might be why it's so extra uncomfortable. So what really happened was Justin was super reluctant to go on the hills. This is based on reading I've done.
Very, very scholarly books, I'm sure.
I'll give you the citations. Will be in the show notes.
We'll do a bibliography.
So apparently he was reluctant to be on the show, but he was like, oh, I guess it will be good for publicity. But he did not want to go on the show as like Justin, which is his real name, and Bobby was his nickname or his middle name or something like that. So he wanted to go as Bobby Brescia. So he would be a little more anonymous, so it would be like people wouldn't really know that it was him. So obviously they couldn't say that when they were talking because you can't talk about the show in that way. So by Lo saying that, she was making fun of him of trying to be anonymous, or that's what I read into it.
Oh yeah, they totally had a good time with it and kind of like ruined his plan to masquerade with a different name.
Correct. So she was just, because she thought it was so funny that he was doing that, although I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I just think it's funny that that's really, he was just trying to be kind of not anonymous necessarily, but just not use his real name, and it kind of backfired.
Yes, it did. I feel like a lot of things backfire when you've got Lo around to stir Lauren up.
I mean, if you're going to go on a reality show, you just have to know what's going to happen, especially, this is season 3, and so they've already been wildly popular, so he knew when he was going to go on there that it would be popular. I'm sure he didn't know how long he'd be on there or what a legend he would become, but it's really funny when you think about it now.
The most legendary.
But But this is really very, very awkward. I was like very tense staring at it. I didn't really enjoy it at all because at first Audrina tried to drag him into her room, and I don't know if he was like, oh no, I want to like talk to Lauren because she's famous, or he was like trying to be polite. I kind of thought he was trying to be polite by going in there instead of just running into the room. Like he thought it might be rude and he wanted to make a good impression. What do you think?
Well, Susan, since I just rewatched this literally like 2 hours ago, I can tell you on good authority that he said, hey, let's see your room, after Lo said, so Justin, I hear you're trying to change your name to Bobby. And then he sulkily says, you can call me whatever the hell you want, whatever floats your boat. And then that's when
they went into the room. But you know, like when they first walk in, she tries to pull him into the room right away because I think she's embarrassed. She looks embarrassed.
Well, she knows he's going to misbehave and say something weird.
But why bring him back to the apartment? It was her idea. If she was embarrassed, she shouldn't have. It was just so bizarre, but I was really uncomfortable during that scene. I didn't really enjoy it.
Maybe she didn't know that Lauren and Lo are plotting and eating their dessert at the coffee table.
But also, remember, she and Lauren were supposed to go to this thing afterwards, after her date. They had already talked about it earlier in the episode, and apparently Audrina had 2 tickets, and she and Lauren were supposed to go. So then all of a sudden they come out of Audrina's room.
And they say, we're going to 40 Deuce.
Come out as Lo and Lauren are actually like discussing the situation, which is super rude. I'm sure they had been pre-gaming, Jem.
I'm sure they had. I hope they were.
But anyway, that's when they said they're going to 40 Deuce, and Lauren is shocked and the look on her face, and then Audrina's like, do you want to come? And Lauren's like, no. And she seems super confused, and then we find out when they actually leave, it's because Audrina had her other ticket.
And Lo says, I think that Justin Bobby took your ticket.
I have to say, though, that I do not endorse Lauren and Lo in this scene because I thought they were really rude, especially Lo. Lauren kind of sat back, but I thought they were very rude to Justin Bobby for someone who was just meeting him for the first time. And I understand that's probably because they know about the past and Vegas and everything, and they're not willing to give him a chance. But I was like, y'all were in the wrong. But I also think Lauren feeds off of Lo sometime, and so they were like ganging up.
Maybe they were worried that the handsome, dashing, and mysterious Justin Bobby would steal their thunder on the show, and they were trying to haze him a little bit to put him in his place and show him how fabulous they were. What is the worst thing that has ever happened to you when you've had an extra ticket to something?
Well, the other day, one of our favorite musicians is coming into town, and so I text you, Jem, and said, I don't have to work until 10:30. Tickets go on sale at 10, so I'll buy the tickets. And you wrote back, okay. And I didn't read over the text that I wrote until later, so a couple of hours later, I was like, yeah, I got the tickets, and they were super expensive because tickets are ridiculously expensive these days. And you're like, what are you talking about? I bought tickets. So we had both bought tickets, and I went back like, oh, I'm going to send you the screenshot of my text message, and there was a typo in the text message. So it was unclear that I was the one buying them. It could have been read either way. If I had gotten a text message with a typo in it, I would have clarified it. But I mean, you know, what are you going to do? Everyone's not as smart as me.
I guess I'm just not as thorough, but at least we ended up with double the tickets instead of half the tickets, because my terrible story is that exact situation. When I was in my 20s, I had a bit of a disagreement with a close friend, and looking back now, it was just somebody who I shouldn't have been super close with. We would have been better off as just kind of like acquaintances, and I had promised to take care of tickets to go see the biggest concert of our life with the biggest probably rock star in history, right? Like a really famous musician. The tickets were super hard to get, and I went out of my way to be sure I got tickets for me and my boyfriend at the time and for this couple. And then when her boyfriend came to pick up the tickets for me, there was one less than there were supposed to be. And she and I had been going through a hard time, and so obviously I was like, there's no way she'll think I did this on purpose because this is the most important show ever. And I think they ended up getting an extra ticket. I have rarely felt so bad about something as I did that day because it really was an honest mistake. But we all ended up going, and it was fine, and we got to see him probably more than once after that day. But that was definitely a bad extra ticket situation. So Lauren, calm down with your 40 Deuce ticket being stolen by Justin Bobby, because I think that you turned out okay.
What do you think 40 Deuce was? Just a club?
I think it was like a rock club, and Audrina with her job got comps, and she probably only had 2 to see some hot band that was really hard to get into. They kept talking about having assigned seats and stuff like that, so it was probably more up Justin Bobby's alley anyway if it was something Audrina was into. Just saying.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so now we go to the next morning. We're back at the Hillside Villas, and the girls are talking about what happened the night before, and Audrina's trying to convince Lauren that Justin has changed as Lauren cooks them scrambled eggs. I need a roommate that cooks me scrambled eggs. I mean, my husband will make me breakfast a lot, but you never made me scrambled eggs when we were roommates, Jim.
Indeed, I did not. And a couple of weeks ago, I started to make scrambled eggs in my home, in my kitchen.
And you burned them.
I did not burn them. I started making the eggs, and all of a sudden I was like, honey, I don't really remember how to make scrambled eggs. And he was like, you just whisk them up in a bowl and push them around on the skillet. And I was like, okay, good, that's what I'm doing. And they actually turned out to be delicious. But how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how passive-aggressive is Elsie in this scene?
So passive-aggressive. I would give her like a 6 or a 7. She's very passive-aggressive. And I'm like, didn't she say, like, the last time they talked about it, she was going to give him a chance? Like, everyone deserves a second chance. So I think Lo has definitely, like, poisoned well on that one.
Lo's just put a bee in Lauren's bonnet, as we say down here in the South.
So Lauren says, so are y'all going to be like boyfriend and girlfriend? I'm like, why are you trying to have this DTR talk with her? Like, what is getting all up in her business? But she said, well, not like a boyfriend, but we're going to try and see what happens.
And Lauren says, remember, Audrina, you and I have very different tastes. And they kind of like say it in chorus, but then Lauren tacks on, but kind of the same, which I think is more of her passive aggressiveness, trying to say that this is going to end as badly as me and Jason did.
I kind of took that to mean they both like bad boys.
Yes. People that are always in trouble.
Yeah, seriously. So then we head to a scene with Spencer and Brody.
Oh,
they're driving down the road.
If our previous episode of this podcast was cringeworthy convention, this is definitely like cringeworthy convention part 2.
Yes, because Spencer announces to Brody that he is proposing to Heidi this weekend in Santa Barbara, and I adore Brody in this whole scene. He is amazing. I was dying laughing. His reaction is so perfect because he's being super rational about it, and he's just like, dude, what is wrong with you? You're 23 years old. And Spencer's like, well, I'm almost 24, as if that makes a difference. First of all, Spencer is the most immature person ever. He should not have gotten married till he was like 40. And obviously, I know in hindsight, they're still married, blah, 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 but still, someone like Spencer should not have been proposing to anyone at 24.
Correct. And let me share some quotes from the scene. Brody, homie, you've been dating her for 1 year. Spencer, flawless and perfect. Brody,
hold on, Jim. I'm going to have to interrupt you right there. He said that their relationship was flawlessly perfect.
Yeah, no.
Let's see. They've barely been dating, and they had the pregnancy scare in which he told her to get out of his car because he was so mad at her about the pregnancy scare, even though, of course, she was in the wrong. They've been constantly fighting. He has made her break up with one of her best friends. Their relationship has been anything but flawless. It's been awful.
It really has, but it has been perfect. He did say perfect as well, Susan. It was really perfect when he told the tabloids that Heidi's roommate / best friend had a sex tape, and they screamed at each other in a club. That was pretty flawless and perfect.
Anyway, continue on with the quotes, Jim.
My last and final quote from the scene that I enjoyed is Brody saying, homie, get married at like 30 or 35. I could not agree more, Brody.
I just loved how disgusted Brody is. Like, he's not
sugarcoating it.
No, he's not at all. He's not even trying to pretend that he's okay with it or put on a facade. He's just like, dude, this is the worst idea ever. It's so funny. I love it. So then we head to Epic Records, and Audrina is chatting with her favorite coworker,
Sierra.
Sorry.
My name is Sierra for all the fine fellas.
Sorry, whatever your name is. We always have a hard time pronouncing it, and I apologize.
She's no Elodie. Let's just say that right now.
She's trying to be Elodie, but, you know.
Doesn't everyone want to be Elodie? I know I do.
Of course. So anyway, they're talking about the Justin Bobby situation and how Lauren doesn't like him, and she's like super sympathetic to Audrina, but you can tell she's like, I feel like I've heard things about him and they're not good. That is exactly why you have to be careful of what you tell your friends when you get mad at a boy. If you want them to ever like him again, don't dog him too much. It will come back to haunt you.
And I can't remember which scene in the show that Audrina has this conversation with one of the girls. It's either Lauren or her coworker, and she's like, I know I've complained and vented to you about him before, and that's all you know, but I promise he's great. great. I think it was the passive-aggressive kitchen
Yeah, I think so,
scene.
too.
And it's kind of hard to, like you said, come back from that. And also Audrina expresses the fact that she's been single for 3 to 4 years, and it's been really hard on her. I'm sure, Susan, it was so hard to be Audrina Patridge in 2008. I'm kidding. It might have been.
She's so gorgeous. I can't believe she hasn't had a boyfriend. I know that doesn't like have anything to do with it, but it's just like, oh man. But she's being very vulnerable and saying what she wants. She just so happened, it's Justin Bobby, and I feel bad for her because I think she really did like him. But anyway.
Can we move on to my favorite scene of the show?
You want to move on to the ice scene?
Ice in Brentwood, obviously the greatest jewelry store.
They also have purses.
Yeah.
Real expensive things here, Spencer says.
He's like, they have purses in the store and high-end things.
I have to say, I think the scenes that I loved the most in this episode were the ones with Brody because he was so awesome.
He's so fun. He's a great foil for Spencer's intensity in this scene.
I would have to say, because they were very like how they flashed that logo up there, that Spencer was probably getting like a massive discount on the ring because first of all, that was a huge ring. Do you think it was a pink diamond or?
I'm sure it was some ridiculous piece of crap, like something that, Paris Hilton returned or like Nicole Richie didn't want to wear anymore, and they took it back to the store and they called Spencer and they were like, hey, do you want to do an engagement? You can have this ring if you come in and talk about how high end we are. And then when they get in there, he's talking about, can you just show me to the most high end area? And the sales girl's like, right over here. And he's like, wow, this is like J-Lo or Kobe Bryant.
Oh, Spencer, with those kind of comments, you were not ready to get married. So anyway, he picks out like a huge blingy ring and he puts it on his pinky and says how much he likes it, and he's so ready to get engaged. And Jem, he's so ready to get engaged that he rips up his receipt so he can't return the ring. How sweet is that?
Adorable. And he says, Heidi better not lose this. But you know what I was interested in thinking about is by him tearing up that receipt could have been the most good luck thing Spencer Pratt has ever done in his life, because who's laughing now? Who doesn't need to show the receipts, Susan?
Jem, I would also like to know if Heidi still has that specific ring, because if she doesn't, it might have been like repossessed or something. We have to look and see. So listeners, go Google it and see, because I'm very curious to know, because you know how it is like on The Bachelor and Bachelorette and things like that. The rings are provided, so you always wonder if they end up having to buy their own rings or they get to keep those rings. There's all sorts of weird ring stuff, so I'd be very curious to know if she still has that or if they had to sell it at some point when they were in debt and things like that. So
somebody please tweet us at The Hills Podcast and tell us what happened to that ring, because now I am dying to know.
And as they walk out the door, you can just hear Brody mutter, "You have officially lost your mind." So then we head to Spencer and Heidi driving out of L.A. Spencer's so ready to get out of L.A. Heidi wants to know what the surprise is, and Spencer just grins like a Cheshire cat, Jem.
Spencer, couldn't it have just been, like a puppy or like a kitten in a sweater? Like, do we have to leap right to a ring?
Except I have to say, Heidi knows exactly what's going on. I don't think she's not, it's not a secret at all.
True. I wish that it had been, but it's pretty...
Jem is currently checking her text messages while we're recording, which is against the Words Unspoken, the Hills podcast rules.
I'm sorry. I was thinking about sushi, and I wanted to order some on Postmates. So
do it.
Do you want me to?
We love Postmates. Okay. If you would like to sponsor the show, give us a call.
Yeah, Postmates, shoot us a tweet, because we love you so much, and I've probably spent my whole life savings on you since you were invented. I'm about to use you now to order sushi because I just realized how much I want some, and it's Sunday evening, and Susan's about to go out on the town, and I'm having a quiet night at home, that's so backwards.
That's role reversal.
The world is upside down. So you talk about the beach house while I order sushi from Postmates.
So what I think is so funny about the end of this scene as they're driving to Santa Barbara is MTV tries to make it seem super romantic with sweeping music, beautiful vistas, and it's just gorgeous, but it's Spencer and Heidi, so I'm hashtag not buying it.
Yeah, I don't know how authentic that is, Susan.
Yeah.
Probably about as authentic as him paying for the... Oh, I just remembered what he said in the ring scene about how he was going to use Brody's credit card.
Oh, yeah.
And Brody's Kathy's like, dude, you're not using my credit card to buy an engagement ring.
That was funny. So then we see that Lauren is also heading to the beach, but she's heading to Laguna Beach. So she goes back to her parents' house. And I don't know about you, but I really love Lauren's parents, so I was really excited to see this. Kathy and Jim are awesome. I think they're, for being like super wealthy people, they seem to be really down to earth. And I think how they interact with Lauren has always been like super nice and grounded. And I'm sure she's spoiled, but they also like remember in Laguna Beach when he like grounded her and Lo had to be like, please, can she go out? Because her grades were bad. It was just so funny to think about now where she is, that she was getting in trouble for bad grades. But anyway, she has this great conversation with her mom. Kathy's really worried that all the sex tape stuff and the parting ways with friends has hardened Lauren, and she said she doesn't want to see her become super cynical like a lot of people in LA are. And Lauren's like, but the people who really screwed me over aren't even from LA, because Heidi's from Colorado. And Kathy's like, well, you know what, just being in LA and being in that environment can really like screw you up. And I'm sure that's true.
Susan, all I noticed during this intense, serious, motherly conversation was that her mom was simultaneously cutting out the middles of tomatoes for Lauren just the way she likes them.
That's what moms do, Jim.
Apparently.
So then we head to Santa Barbara for the most romantic date ever, Jim. Spencer's trying to do this really nice speech, Jim, but it just sounds so awkward. Why is this such an awkward scene? It's supposed to be romantic, and number one, he never says, will you marry me? All he says is, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. That's the only time he comes remotely close to saying, will you marry me? And I know you don't have to say like the official thing and get on one knee or whatever, but I was like, oh, it was so insincere. Why are you doing this? It's obviously not the right thing to do. It was just so awkward.
All I have to say is, I wish that my proposal had started out with the phrase, but in all seriousness. Heidi, Susan, shows zero surprise about that ring.
She's not surprised at all, which makes me think, A, she either picked it out, or B, she was rooting through his drawer and found it, or C, he already told her what he was going to do and showed it to her. It was like she could never be a real actress because she did such a terrible job of it was just such an awkward scene, and this was probably like the big scene that they were advertising and things like that, and it was so awkward and maybe wins.
However, at the time, all of America was in an uproar over this engagement, and maybe nobody noticed how crazy it was. But Susan, if we were at your house, we could look on your extensive bookshelf of the Hills references, and we could find out if they really got engaged at that moment, or if they were engaged before or after, or how that went. Do you remember?
Jim, that's not in any of my stuff, so I'm not sure. I'm just waiting for the Spidey tell-all book.
So there's no research, peer-reviewed papers on this subject, no encyclopedia containing this information.
I wish. Oh my gosh, the Hills Encyclopedia would be awesome. I bet our former guest, honorary brother Seth Thomas, would be amazing at doing a Hills Encyclopedia. So let me just put that little bug in your ear, Seth.
Okay, you know what I would call the Hills Encyclopedia? The Hills Encarta.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing!
And it would come on a CD-ROM. It would be so retro.
It would be so 2000s, although I guess that's more like late 90s.
Well, let's not quibble, Susan, over my genius idea.
So then we go into the end of the episode and we get this beautiful montage of Kathy and Lauren talking. Spencer and Heidi snuggling under a blanket. They can't even keep the blanket over them because it's just more awkwardness. And then we see Justin and Audrina riding off into the sunset on Justin's motorcycle.
And how great of a couple do they look like at that point? Just cruising down the PCH with their motorcycle. I mean, Audrina fits right into his lifestyle, but things won't always be that perfect, Susan.
I mean, if you were going into this episode and just watching this episode, you would probably think they were about to start an epic love story. Now, this will be an epic story, but no love.
Elsie just pieces out from her mom's house. I guess she just showed up for a bottle of water and some tomatoes with the middle cut out. And the sun sets on another episode of Big Drama on the West Coast.
Does this episode of The Hills pass the Bechdel test?
Susan, I have bad news. This episode, in my opinion, did not pass the Bechdel test. As a quick reminder for our new listeners, the Bechdel test was developed in the 80s by Alison Bechdel, a cartoonist, and she required 3 criteria of Hollywood movies to see if they passed her test. The first question is there a scene where 2 women talk to each other, Susan?
Yes.
Are these 2 women named in the episode?
Yes.
And do they speak to each other about anything else besides a man?
I'm going to say no, because even at the end when Lauren and Kathy are talking about like Hollywood and all that, that still has something to do with boys, so I'm going to count that as no.
I wrote down definite fail. Almost passed with Mom in Laguna.
Yeah, it was close, but I'm going to say no cigar, because that was really about Spencer. It was just no one was named.
And Lauren was talking about how her past 3 closest people had betrayed her, which Jason was one of them. So she was including like a relationship with a boy. I just couldn't let it pass. I wanted to, but this is just a very anti-Bechdel test episode. But we'll let them fail the test every now and then.
Jem, do you watch Crazy Ex-Girlfriend?
Not yet. I have not invested my time.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. You should. But anyway, on the episode, I was catching up the other day, and on the episode, I think before the season finale of this season, during the song, they had a thing about the Bechdel test, and it made me think of the podcast, and it made me chuckle.
I feel like we're such trailblazers.
I know. You really need to watch it, though.
Susan, we have gotten so much feedback about our use of the Bechdel test for every episode of The Hills. We've had the most random people on Twitter shout out to us about it and how much they love that. And we've been surprised by how many episodes actually did pass the Bechdel test, which is kind of a big deal. And then everybody loves our Bechdel test so much, we even included it in our trailer that we released a couple of weeks ago about the show.
Yes, did everyone see our trailer? We would love some feedback on it.
Yeah, we've released 2 so far in 2018. Hopefully we'll have 1 a month for you to kind of give you a little preview of what's coming. But hopefully you're enjoying those, because I'm having a lot of fun making them.
I was about to say, Jem acts like it's such a hardship to do these trailers, when really she loves doing them and she is obsessed with it, and I have to rein her back in on some of them. So
yeah, I got slapped on the hand today with our new one, but apparently you just can't use Elodie's name in every scene of a trailer. Seth, I'm doing it for you. Hashtag Team Elodie, hashtag Hills fam. Winners of the week.
Jem, who is your winner of the week? And it better not be the same one as me.
It probably is, because there's a very clear winner in this episode. Not only was this person the winner of the week, but they were the winner for life, and their name was Heidi Montag Pratt, and they got engaged to a person they are still married to today, and nobody else on the show can say the person they were with is still around today, except maybe Brody Jenner is married to... No. JK.
Oh my God, Jem, what is wrong with you?
I cannot keep up with Brody Jenner's life. There's too many kids, not family, and I don't know who they're marrying.
My winner of the week was Justin. Because this is the beginning of him being super famous. Let's be honest.
That is true.
So he's my winner of the week.
I so thought we'd have the same one. Or I thought you would say Spencer because he was engaged to Heidi.
No, that's just too awkward. The whole situation was too awkward and fake the whole episode. Like, I couldn't stand either one of them during the whole thing. And that happens often, but it was different this time because it was like, it just wasn't real. I mean, I know, reality show isn't real, blah, blah, blah. But, usually they act like everything's real. This one was just so far off base that it just was so cringeworthy. This one should have been cringeworthy convention, Jem.
I told you, it was part 2. I will say, you know what is real in 2018, Susan?
What, Jem?
Spidey. Jem.
And Susan's funniest moments. Jem, I'm just going to go first because I don't want you to steal mine. Obviously, we've already talked about it pretty extensively, but the funniest moment to me was Brody Jenner in the car, all of his comments, and then all of his comments at Ice later. Hilarious. He was so funny. He helped take away that awkward Heidi and Spencer feeling I had over the episode because he was so real, but everything he said was so funny. I loved it. So that's my funniest moment. What about you, Jem?
I will say that Brody and his family tree have no shyness in front of a camera.
This is true.
My funniest moment was when Spencer said that they needed to put a GPS on the ring in case Heidi lost it, because he was trying to make it sound like he had just dropped like a lot of money on this ring, and we've been through that and we know what probably happened. So yeah, that was just funny. And then I went off down the rabbit hole thinking about having a GPS in your car instead of looking at directions on your phone, and just how different and how simple life was. You just had a TomTom back then to get around, or attached to wedding rings that might get lost.
There are some people in LA that are. There are some people in LA that are. There are some people in LA that are.
This episode is the easiest decision ever. It's obviously him proposing to someone that he has only dated a year. That is my biggest pratfalls. I don't know if it's yours. It's ridiculous. And I'm not saying it's ridiculous to propose to someone when you've only been dating them a year. It is ridiculous for Spencer to propose to Heidi after they've only been dating a year and they have not had the smoothest of relationships. So I think that's a huge pratfall.
My biggest pratfall of this episode was the apartment graffiti and Spencer saying the dollar sign was his special touch to the artwork. He commissioned it, but the dollar sign was his special touch. You think he thought that the dollar sign was a high-end thing?
Do you think he added the dollar sign, or the artist who did it did the dollar sign? Because it kind of looked a little different from the rest, so I think he added it.
Spencer went in the junk drawer and got a Sharpie and just wrote that dollar sign right on top of Banksy's valuable artwork.
We should have looked at the end of that to see if there were credits on like who did the art, because I'm sure he did it for free.
That's another thing that our listeners need to tweet us right now at The Hills Podcast and tell us who did that, whose idea was it, what's the whole story behind it, what does Us Weekly say about it, because they're kind of, the experts on these things.
Thank you so much for listening to Words Unspoken, The Hills Podcast. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you listening. We would love it if you would take the time to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. That would be so great.
But only if you like us.
Only if it's 5 stars. Hey!
5-star only, kids.
You can reach us by email if you have anything you want to share with us about this episode at wordsunspokenpodcast@gmail.com.
On Twitter, we're at The Hills Podcast, and on Instagram, we're Words Unspoken Podcast.
You can also check us out on our website at wordsunspokenpodcast.com.
I have a challenge for you today. Tell one friend about this podcast and tell them to give us a listen. We promise our sound quality will be going up with every episode, and we'll do a better job of that. So we'd love for you to share this with another friend who was a Hills fan back in the day.
Thanks for listening.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
You and all your pretty little friends up in the hills where the party never ends. Your schemes and your dreams when you're whole and you're broken. I'm telling all about it in my words unspoken.
That we even put it in our...
Shoeless. Don't you sneeze,
stuck his
you
nose
silly
in there.
kitty. You just stuck your nose in a bowl of water, didn't you, buddy? Jem and I would like to dedicate this episode to the memory of our beloved 15-year-old cat, Shoeless Joe Jackson. He was such a sweet cat, and he kept us company during this episode of the Hills Podcast, so we would like to dedicate it to him. We miss you, buddy.